Today we're talking with June Austin, author of Genesis of Man. Thanks for joining us today, June.
Thank you.
We'd like to just hear a little bit about where this book came from.
Right. Well, where do I begin? Really, it goes back, I suppose, well, really, to when my mum died, which was just before the millennium, the end of 1999.
Okay.
I'd kind of had a few problems at work, and I decided at that point, because my mum left me some money, that it was time to actually stop work for a while and take time out. And so one of the first things I actually did was to enroll on a course to actually train as a crystal therapist.
Oh.
Which is using crystals, basically, as a means of healing.
Okay.
And kind of halfway through the course, one of the things we were asked to do was to write some kind of thesis on a crystal-related subject. The idea being that we would actually present this to the rest of the group to kind of get some practice at speaking. And I chose to do mine on crystal skulls, which, do you know what they are?
No.
Well, they're basically crystals in the shape of human skulls.
Ah.
Quite fascinating little things, and I was collecting them at that point. And so I decided it would make an interesting thesis, and I started to write, and write, and write. And before I knew what was happening, what was supposed to be 3,000 words had suddenly become 10,000. And I think it was at that point that I realised that it was actually going to be a book.
Serendipity, then.
Yes, indeed. And looking back on it, in fact, I've never really ended up practicing crystal therapy. So I think the only reason I actually did that course was to actually write the book.
Excellent. And the book itself, judging from what I've seen on your website, the book itself is very historical, spiritual, religious, and encompassing. It's a big venture.
Indeed. It kind of covers all those different things. I mean, it's one of those things which is very difficult to pigeonhole, really. So I kind of coined the phrase myself, spiritual history, which I use to describe it. Because really that's what it is. It's talking about the history of our planet from a spiritual perspective.
Excellent. And how would you describe it, in comparison to some of the other books that are out there, such as The Secret?
Well, The Secret, it's presented in a very kind of modern way, but there isn't actually anything really new in there. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a brilliant book, and it's obviously helping loads and loads of people. But it's really a kind of a collection of quotes, I suppose, isn't it, with the author's kind of views on the different quotes from various people that she's interviewed.
Right.
Whereas my book is much more in depth, and also because The Secret seems to focus primarily on the subject of manifestation. Whereas my book, it's presented almost as a time frame, because it's actually in 4 parts. And so part 1 is the history of planet Earth, or really I suppose the unknown history, from 35 million years ago, and a lot of the information, incidentally, comes from esoteric sources, like channeled information and so on and so forth. So part 1 is from that time point up to, let's think, probably about 1 million years ago, which is around the time of the lost continent of Lemuria. And then part 2 goes on from there, talking about Lemuria and her different colonies, like Atlantis, for example, which was one of them. Not many people seem to actually realise that. And the origins of the Egyptian and the Mesoamerican empires, which again were Lemurian colonies. And then part 3 goes on to talk about various kind of Gnostic schools. Gnosticism being a kind of esoteric school of thought. It's actually the original form of Christianity, which again many people don't realise. So that's about the different branches of that, such as the Knights Templar, for example, the Cathars. Let's think, the Rosicrucians, I think, are in there, and all these kind of different schools.
The Bloodlines of Christ.
Yeah. Although I'll talk about that in more depth, really, in part 4, because part 4 is where I go much more in depth about the origins of the Christian faith and dispelling many of the myths about Jesus, like you say, about the so-called Jesus bloodline, because there's been lots written about that, books like The Holy Blood and Holy Grail, and of course the Da Vinci Code.
Sure. Well, it seems like a very controversial and popular field.
Yeah, indeed, but also very timely, I think, because more and more people are actually beginning to think about these things and question what they're told, which is a very good thing, actually, I think, because we shouldn't just blindly accept.
Right.
You know, we really do need to question and not just necessarily accept the things that are given to us. And a lot of the Christians and religious people that I meet and have met on my travels through life, and of course as an author, don't seem to question. They just take what's told them by the church without actually doing their own research. You know, and as part of the research for the book, I actually went to attend an Alpha course, which I think you also have in the States.
Right.
And, you know, from some of the comments that I made, it was obvious that some of the people had really been severely challenged. And they seemed to be quoting this same old stuff all the time. And when I went home and actually looked it up in my Bible, that actually isn't what the Bible says.
Right.
You know, they were just repeating what was told themselves by their church and not looking it up for themselves and then just passing that on without checking the facts.
Well, there certainly is a lot of that going around in the history of man, which I think that your book certainly will cover in over the millions of years.
Well, I certainly hope so.
And I noticed that on your website you also have a blog that you regularly post to. It's sort of another writing outlet for you.
Yes, that's been quite an interesting experience, actually. I use it always as a kind of diary, I suppose, my publishing adventures. So I don't tend to write in it necessarily every day. It tends to be maybe just once a week, or I guess really when I'm inspired to do so.
All right. Well, writing in all its forms seems to be something that keeps you very happy. And if people wanted to find more about you, what is your website?
www.JuneAustin, which is spelled with an I, AUSTIN.co.uk.
Okay, and there's plenty of pictures, information, blog, links, all kinds of great stuff. I've actually been there. So. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, June.
Thank you, Ben. It's been nice talking to you.
Okay.